Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk about the factors that affect the elasticity of supply. Okay, now before we get into the factors, I just want to define elasticity for you. Elasticity is nothing but a measurement of the percentage change in quantity supplied of a commodity in response to some percentage change in its own price. Now, a lot of words. It might be a little complex, but it's very easy. Now, what have you studied in law of supply? You have studied that when price of a commodity increases, its supply also increases, right? And when price of a commodity falls, supply of that commodity also falls. Okay, X is the commodity. Now, the market price when increases, supply also increases, right? So, but the extent to which the supply will increase is what elasticity tells us. Now, I'm going to give you, now elasticity is actually nothing but how easy is it to change supply? How easy is it to change supply? Okay. Now, I'm going to give you a very, very simple example that will just absolutely clear this whole concept. Say we have pens, and let's say we have some artifacts, say some ancient paintings. Okay, we have some ancient paintings. Now say the market price of pens suddenly rises, so price of pens suddenly rise. So what will happen? The supplier of pens will also supply more pens, right? It will supply more pens, so it the supply of pen will also increase. Pretty easy, obviously. Now let's say the price of ancient paintings suddenly increase a lot. Say the demand for ancient paintings rises. So if the demand rises, that means the price rises. So let's say the market price of these ancient paintings rise. Do you think that the supply will also rise? No, the supply will not rise. Why? Because ancient paintings are fixed. They are fixed. You can't just increase paintings. See, I'll give you one more example. Let's talk about fossils. Let's say that the market price of fossils suddenly rise. Do you think that the supply of fossils will also increase? No, it will not increase immediately because to get fossils you need to do a lot of drilling, you need to do a lot of machinery and everything. It will take time to set up these machineries, you know, to set up these machineries and supply more of these fossils. Because you know that when the price of a commodity rises, supplier would want to supply more, right? But if the supplier supply these fossils, then it is not easy. It Supplier wouldn't immediately start supplying more fossils because it takes time for fossils to it takes time to get fossils to dig into the earth and get fossils. Okay, I'll give you one more example. Let's say we talk about toothpicks, okay, and diamonds, or let's say petroleum, okay. If the market price of toothpicks rise, then what will happen? The supplier will supply more toothpicks, right? So the supply of toothpicks will increase if the price rises. It is easy to increase the supply of toothpicks. You just need to set up more machinery, more factories, and everything. So it's easy. If the price of petroleum rises, do you think the supply of petroleum will also increase? No, the supply of petroleum will not increase. Why? Because petroleum is a fixed resource. It's a fixed resource. It takes time to renew petroleum. The total amount of petroleum is fixed, right? It takes millions of years to for all these dead animals and plants to decompose and change into fossil fuels that you get, and you process it and you get petroleum, right? And so the supply will not increase. Supply will remain the same even when price increases. So when your price is increasing but supply is not increasing, that is when you say that the supply is inelastic, because it is difficult to change supply. But in this case, it is very easy to supply more uh, toothpicks, because it's easier for because it's just easy, you know. So that is why If your price is increasing and immediately supply is also increasing, that means what? Supply is responsive, it's very highly responsive. And if it is highly responsive and it's also easy to change supply, easy to increase supply, that is why it is elastic. Now let's move on to the factors. The first factor is availability of inputs. So what availability of inputs say is, it's same, over here, the inputs that we use is what? The inputs that we use is drillers and mines and everything, right? These are all, and also laborers and so many things. So now now what happens in case of inputs. If my inputs are many, if my inputs are many and they are complex and they are difficult to set up, then supply will not increase easily, right? Now let's talk about cars. If the price of cars suddenly increase, the supply of cars will not increase immediately, because to manufacture cars you need so many things. You need machines, you need tires, you need so many inputs. But let's say we talk about very frivolous thing. Let's say we talk about again, pencils or eraser. So if the market price of eraser rises, it is very easy to also increase production, because what are the inputs? It's eraser, some natural things, right? But in case of cards, the entire input, the whole processing is very complex, much more complex than erasers. So it's difficult to change the current supply of cards, to increase the current supply. It will take time because of the nature of inputs, right? So if the inputs are not commonly available, then it will be difficult to change supply. But if the inputs are available, then it is easy to change supply. The same thing goes with petroleum. What are the inputs? You need that oil that is deep inside earth. That is the input, but it's not very easy to get it. So the supply of petroleum will not be very easy to change. It will take time. Next is natural constraints. Again, this is same. Let's talk about saffron, or so saffron, or let's talk about teak. Okay, teak tree. It takes a long time to grow teak tree, like 5 years. Okay, 5 years. Now, suddenly, if say in 2001, the price of teak tree suddenly increases, do you think the supply of teak will also increase? No. It takes 5 years to grow teak. Now, this is just an hypothetical example. It's not actually true. So the supply of teak will not increase. It will be very slow. It will not respond to the price change. Maybe in a few years, let's say in 2006, it will increase a lot. But as you know, natural constraints, you cannot just immediately increase teak, right? So this is how it works. Next one, next, let's see what's the next factor. The next factor is risk taking. Now, in risk taking, what happens is that if the producer if the producer has a high risk appetite, if he is willing to take risk, then supply can easily increase. But if the Okay, so here what happens is that if the producer has a high risk appetite, then supply will increase very easily. Why? Because the producer is willing to take risk to set up more plants, to set up more machinery, to increase production. Okay, because the producer wants to take the risk of setting up more, setting up more factories, production units, and everything, because he wants to increase the supply. There can be a producer who is not willing to take this risk. So if he is not willing to take this risk, how will the supply change? How will the supply increase, right? So, so risk is also a very important factor when it comes to supply. The next factor that we're going to talk about is the nature of commodity. Now, in nature of commodity, it's nothing. If you have perishable goods are those goods that have very low shelf life. So if you have perishable goods, then their supply is inelastic. Why? And if you have durable goods, then their supply is elastic, because perishable goods have a short lifespan, have a short shelf life. Okay, so they are not available all the time. But in case of durable goods, they are available all the time, and because they are available all the time, their supply is available all the time. Okay, that's it. So perishable goods have an inelastic supply, but durable goods have relatively elastic supply. It's not exactly inelastic, it's relatively inelastic in case of perishable goods. Okay. The next factor that we're going to talk about is the time factor. Now, in time factor, what happens in the short run period, you have seen that some factors are fixed while the other factors are variable. Okay. In the long run, what happens? All factors are variable. So, if you have a lot of time, then it is easy for you to employ different inputs, to, set up more machinery and everything, machinery, units, production units and everything. If you have time, that's when you'll get, that's when you'll have, the to set up more, you will have the time, right? And so this is why it will be easy for you to increase supply in case you have a lot of time. In short run, what happens, you don't have enough time to set up more machinery, to set up more production units. We've seen like all these becomes fixed factors, right? Your capital. But in case of long run, you can increase it because you have time to do it, and so your supply will increase, right? And that is why in long run the supply is elastic. Why? Because it's easy to change supply. But in the short run, it is inelastic. It's relatively inelastic because it's difficult to change supply. Okay. Uh, even if supply changes, but it's going to be, the response is going to be a lot less in case when compared to long run. The last factor is technique of production. So now in technique of production, it's nothing. If your production is pretty, so if your technique of production is complex, if it is complex, then supply is difficult, then supply will be inelastic. Why? Because it's very, very complex. If suddenly the price will increase, that doesn't mean the supply will also increase, because the technique, you have to set up more of, uh, machinery that use a certain technique, and that is difficult because, to use a complex technique itself requires a lot of time, a lot of effort. And because of that, the supply is difficult to change, and that is why supply will be less elastic in case the production of a commodity involves the use of complex and expensive technology. So, technique is complex, that means it's expensive. And so, if your technology is expensive, it will be difficult for you to employ that expensive technique. Okay. If the commodity that you're supplying needs a complex technique to be produced, so that is why the more complex the technique of production, the more inelastic supply will be. Thank you.